Mr. Pethiyagoda, this is a topic which is a little unfair, to pick as a topic because it changes so fast, it's so dynamic. But if I ask you, just to give us an introduction to the conversation, what is your assessment of the prevailing state of the crisis as of now?
Look at the grand strategy behind the two sides. The US laid out its strategy at the outset, regime change in Iran and getting rid of Iran's nuclear facility. First of all, protecting the regime, which means they want security guarantees that what happened in June last year and the 28th of February this year is not going to happen again. And there hasn't been any acknowledgement that Iran would need to be safeguarded from future attacks. So that, I think, is why they turned to this idea of getting a tariff on ships that pass through the Strait of Hormuz. But that would be fundamentally illegal because it opens the door to every country adjoining an important commercial waterway. So this is ridiculous. If we allow countries to charge tariffs on international waters, it cannot be allowed. So I think we still haven't got to a point where the warring parties are talking about the core issues, these issues that I just mentioned. We're just talking about having a little scrap, like a bar brawl, without really looking at what each country needs in order to serve its interests. And so how does he get even with Donald Trump? He has to make this tension, keep the oil prices high until the midterm elections in November. So I think Iran will do everything it can to fight a war of attrition to keep this tension going for the next 6 months.
Sri Lanka has been navigating one crisis after the other. But what should we really be focusing on? We spoke about all of this and more with Rohan Pethiyagoda. Stay tuned.
For 30 years, LMD has been the voice of business in Sri Lanka, capturing the pulse of the nation's corporate landscape through its iconic covers. Each cover tells a story, from the first edition in 1994 to the present day, narrating key moments, leaders and trends that have shaped Sri Lanka's business ecosystem. Over the years, LMD covers have featured thought leaders, business pioneers and game-changing innovations, reflecting the evolution of industries and the economy. As we celebrate 30 years, these covers represent more than just publications. They are a testament to LMD's legacy of excellence in business journalism and its unwavering commitment to being Sri Lanka's leading voice of business. LMD, Sri Lanka's voice of business, a legacy of 30 years.
Hello and welcome to LMDtv. The topic of conversation today is the Middle East crisis and how it impacts Sri Lanka. And I'm here with public policy advocate Rohan Pethiyagoda. Welcome to our show.
Thank you so much.
Lovely to have you as always. Mr. Pethiyagoda, this is a topic which is a little unfair, to pick as a topic because it changes so fast, it's so dynamic. But if I ask you, just to give us an introduction to the conversation, what is your assessment of the prevailing state of the crisis as of now?
When you look at it moment by moment, it makes no sense. It's like watching 30 seconds of a table tennis tournament. You can't know what's going on. But if you look at the grand strategy behind the two sides, the US laid out its strategy at the outset, regime change in Iran and getting rid of Iran's nuclear facility. Both those objectives failed. They've tried twice, in June last year and then on the 28th of February. But both those objectives obviously failed, which is why we still have the crisis. On the Iranian side, now that the war has begun, they have their own strategic objectives. First of all, protecting the regime, which means they want security guarantees that what happened in June last year and the 28th of February this year is not going to happen again. So their biggest threats are America and Israel, and there hasn't been any acknowledgement that Iran will need to be safeguarded from future attacks. So that has yet to come. The second thing is the Iranians have suffered tens of or hundreds of billions of dollars worth of damage. They need restitution. So they're looking at reparations. Who's going to pay the reparations? It has to be Israel or the US. That's not going to happen. No. So what we're going to see is basically Iran having to recover that money from somewhere else. They could have looked to their Arab allies on the Arabian Peninsula, but now they want to antagonize that entire set. So that's not going to happen. So that, I think, is why they turned to this idea of getting a tariff on ships that pass through the Strait of Hormuz. But that would be fundamentally illegal because it opens the door to every country joining an important commercial waterway. Sri Lanka has got two, for example, in the south of Sri Lanka, we have a lot of shipping from that comes out of the Strait of Malacca, which also can be tariffed by either Malaysia or Indonesia. Very important, probably more important than the Hormuz Strait.
Yes.
And then we've got the Pork Strait. I think so. This is ridiculous. If we allow countries to charge tariffs of international waters, it cannot be allowed. But Iran has to be incentivized to let go of that because they've got no other way of getting the money to rebuild. So I think we still haven't got to a point where the warring parties are talking about the core issues, these issues that I just mentioned. We're just talking about having a little scrap, like a bar brawl, without really looking at what each country needs in order to serve its interests. So this was roughly what the Obama MCPOA was all about, trying to get some kind of negotiated, monitored transaction on the nuclear materials problem, but that's been taken off the table.
Exactly.
So I think we're in a fairly uncertain place. But given the strategic objectives of the two sides, this war cannot end so.
Yeah.
It's going to go on for a while. And remember the other thing, the supreme leader lost almost his entire family on the 28th of February. He himself is apparently badly injured and disfigured. If I were in his shoes, I would have revenge very much on my mind. Vengeance is something that's fundamental to humans. And so how does he get even with Donald Trump? He has to make this tension, keep the oil prices high until the midterm elections in November. So I think Iran will do everything it can to fight a war of attrition to keep this tension going for the next 6 months.
And while this tension goes, I mean, yes, like you said, it's uncertain, but what is certain is that it's impacting everybody else in terms of energy, in terms of economic, trade. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, there is, the saying that this is maybe the time for Asia to rise up. But right now that does not seem to be happening. What do you think?
Asia's problem is that we have so little energy. We have so little hydrocarbon energy, and we haven't been fast enough to develop renewables. So because of energy security and fertilizer, which comes largely from, most of our fertilizer comes from the Gulf. And so agriculture and food security are both going to be threatened. So for us to rise is a challenge without having these global partnerships. I don't think that's really possible.
I mean, I want to talk about Sri Lanka now because I think we can talk about everyone else and it's so interesting. But we went through a lot of hardship in those initial few weeks. But like all things Sri Lankan, we have adapted, or at least on the surface, things are moving okay. But is this just an illusion, or are we sitting on something that is a little hopeful?
I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic because the government's done most things right.
Right.
If you look at the first 2 weeks, there was a lot of fumbling on the energy issue. First of all, the government denied that there would be a problem. They said this war is going to end soon. If you look at the headlines of the first 2 weeks of March, that's basically what you see. And then it panicked and went to the other extreme, declaring a 4-day week and also a rationing of fuel and so on, rather than letting prices determine demand, which is usually the best thing, market forces, but it's tough on people because prices go up. So they found their feet after a little bit. But basically, I think Sri Lanka has navigated this extremely well. Those first few days, I think the president probably was distracted first with the Irish Dana problem and then with the Irish Boucher problem, which they handled extremely well. On the one hand, they didn't antagonize Americans, and the president didn't even go and sign the condolence book in the Iranian embassy because he didn't want to annoy the US. So I think they've navigated that creditably. But now they seem to have found their feet, and we're looking at not an entirely predictable future, but certainly a less haphazard one than originally. just want to say something about that idea of having a 4-day week.
Yes.
I think we have to stop this idea that holidays fix problems. They don't.
They do not.
They tried it in COVID, it didn't work, and we should never do this. Remember, Sri Lanka went through the whole of the Second World War, much greater privations than we are facing now, without ever declaring a holiday. If you didn't have a transport to go to school, you walked to school. If the school was too far, you got distance learning material. You somehow kept the country going. That is the challenge of a people. When you have a problem, don't declare a holiday and watch television at home. You go and work, because work and production is what generates the revenue that maintains prosperity for everyone.
True. Wow. Definitely something I want to get back to at the end. But you was talking about how we are maintaining relationships, without antagonizing anyone. And I think that has been a strategy. But these are partnerships that really, that we need. For example, Iran, we export over 60% of our tea goes there, and then you have the
Well, not so much, but a lot of goes there.
sorry, yes, I think I have to check my stats. And then of course the US. So how long can we continue balancing parties?
Well, it's been a challenge to export to Iran for a long time because of sanctions. So the Iranians have been strangled by sanctions for decades now. And they've been getting stronger and stronger because the Iranians also, remember, this is an ideological regime. It's not a democracy like Sri Lanka is, where things change every 5 years. They don't change because they're rooted in an ideology. And the ideology also is a difficult one for us to understand, because Iran manages on the one side to be a really good friend when they want to be friendly, but a really bad enemy as well.
Yeah.
So, for example, the courage with which, I use courage loosely there, with which they went around attacking all their neighbors on the Arabian Peninsula during this war, almost all of them, was something that I would have thought very long and hard about, because these people are there forever. They're always going to be your neighbors. But why would they so quick to attack them? Because they don't see their Muslim neighbors as Muslim neighbors. They see them as an increasingly westernized entities. They see them as allies of the United States, who are their enemy, giving bases to the US and so on. So now I think we're going to see a shift, even in countries like the UAE, to try and design a foreign policy that takes them forward with less dependence on the US on the one hand, because the US couldn't protect them, and maintaining some kind of working relationship with Tehran, because they don't want to be attacked again. The UAE has basically been demolished by this war. Even if not physically, people no longer have confidence in its markets. So this is
It's not a safe haven anymore.
no. So I think Sri Lanka needs to be conscious of the fact that Iran is an important market, but we've always dealt with Iran. Because the Iranians have been good on credit, we've been exporting tea to them, we can't get paid in foreign currency by them. But there's been times when businessmen would go to Iran to get paid for their tea and bring the money back in suitcases. Because they can't deal through the banking system. So I'm confident that the trading relationship with Iran will survive, it will persist. But I feel that it's important for us not to antagonize the US as well. And I think we've done that pretty well. Where can I say we? I think the government's done that pretty well. They deserve some credit.
Definitely some credit, especially with, all of Trump's tariffs and everything. We've done well. It's time now to take a very short break, but we soon be back to talk more about the crisis and Sri Lanka.
Display your brand message on digital screens at prime locations. The largest digital advertising network in Sri Lanka. Emerging Media.
Welcome back to the show. We're in conversation with public policy advocate Rohan Pethiyagoda. If I ask you a question, we've had crisis after crisis, from Ditwa to the tariffs, and now the latest is, of course, the cyber crimes. If we were to give, let's say, 3 priorities for the government to focus on, opportunities or threats, what would they be in the next 6 months?
So I don't want to talk about obvious things. But off the cuff, I would say that Sri Lanka needs to sit and have a good long look at what went wrong over the last 80 years since independence, very nearly 80 years. We've fallen back against our Asian competitors. India has surged ahead to almost equal us now in per capita GDP. And we've been slipping back. So the first thing to realize is that we've been doing something wrong for a long time. This idea that we are resilient, I think, is false. Of course, GDP grows by 3 or 4% every year. If you look at our standard of living now, of course, Sri Lankan has a better standard of living than Queen Victoria. She didn't have maybe a running water toilet. You see, so with the whole world is progressing, and we shouldn't think that just because we are progressing along with the rest of the world, that's good enough. It's not good enough. We have to progress faster than the rest. But many people don't like that. We still have a mentality in Sri Lanka that progress is somehow bad. We hear part of our people saying, oh, we should be more like Singapore. But when I did a YouTube video about progress, about public holidays, I think last year, saying that we should have fewer public holidays, we did 28, I think, last year. It's so crazy. And I had a lot of pushback from viewers who said, we don't want to be like Singapore. We want our holidays. We want to have a 4 day on which we can have a drink at home and watch cricket. So I think we're not totally committed towards this kind of ideal of economic and national progress the same way that many other countries are. So you have to recognize that and make sure that you take the people with you to whatever destination you're aiming for. The second thing is that we find ourselves without a national wealth opportunity. Let me say that more clearly. About 60% of the real estate in Sri Lanka belongs to the government. Yes. It earns zero. 60% of your most valuable asset is dead. Okay. And nobody ever says, hang on a minute, how do we monetize this? Right? So the fundamental thing, we have literally 1 million people in Sri Lanka who live on land on what's called a GA permit. They can't take that to the bank and get a loan. They can't let their children inherit that because there is no inheritance for a permit. It's not a title deed. What stops any government from just making those permits into title deeds? You add incredible wealth to your entire community by that one paper transaction. Because now when everyone's got a title deed, they monetize it. They go and borrow money, they invest. We don't do the simple strategic things that we need in our country to make us successful. So I think the way to look at progress in Sri Lanka is to think, where are we going wrong? Rather than just saying, here's our target for the future, we look at the opportunities that await us. What prevents us from having a national wealth fund? We've got all these hundreds of government-owned business enterprises and corporations. Yes. List them on the stock market. Put the shares in the National Wealth Fund. The government stands to make trillions of rupees from that simple action, but they don't do it. So we're sitting on the opportunities. We're sitting on a gold mine of a country that has been mismanaged from DS Senamayaka to Anira Kumara Dissanayake. There's not one of them that has the vision to bring about a Sri Lanka that is truly modern, prosperous, market-orientated and futuristic. That's a failing that we need to address.
Do you think it's because we are very welfare focused? Because we've always, at least intentionally, I don't know whether the intention is correct or not, but we've always put welfare, on top of the list. Is that acting against us?
Yeah, I mean, sure, that's been a problem from the Hartal of 1952, 53 onwards. It's what I call the diao mentality, just demanding stuff without knowing that you actually have to earn it. So that is part of the problem, but that's what government is there for. Government has to be the adult in the room that says, no, you can't eat too many sweets. It's bad for me. And now we've got the diabetes. So the only way to treat that is by having less sugar, as it were, because less social sugar. Of course, we have to always care for the poor and the needy. We always have to have free education, at least in school level, not at university. I'm against university education.
Definitely not.
Because we're just exporting brains to the rest of the world. People should be paying back for that. So that's another discussion. And definitely have free health, because Sri Lanka's health service has been one of the wonders of Asia. We've done a fantastic job, especially with primary health. That's why we've got life expectancy that's now in the mid-70s. Much better than most other Asian countries. Actually better than some of the United States. Wow. I think Sri Lanka's life expectancy at birth now is better than Louisiana, for example. So we've done well and we should be proud of those achievements, but we have to do a lot more that really is relevant, important, and urgent.
Ms. Pethiyagoda, you spoke about what the government can do. I also want to ask what the people can do, because at the end of the day, like you said, there will be backlash when you bring about change. On the other hand, we have people who say, we have the technology, we have the brains, whether they are drained or not. So apparently we have what it takes, but we don't have the will to do it. How can we change that?
I think to change a national mindset is an illusion. You can't really do that. When we were faced with the energy problem 2 months ago, one of the first things people could have thought of doing was switching off their car air conditioner, having the shutters down, and just suffering a little bit on their way to work. Nobody did that. Not even the politicians did that. That could save 20% of your energy bill. So to expect people to think of solutions for themselves, I'm not criticizing people because even I didn't, so let's be honest here, but we could have done. But it takes leadership from government. That's why we have governments. We elect governments so that they can show us the way, because they have the resources with which to think, with which to devise solutions, and then they invite us either voluntarily to follow the system that they advocate, or they make laws, statutes, regulations that we are compelled to follow. So I think that works. I think one of the best ways you can see how well it has worked is by tax enforcement.
Yeah.
Over the past few years, Sri Lanka's tax revenue has been growing very rapidly. More and more people are coming into the tax net and are proud and happy to pay their taxes because they're getting something back for it. Just think of Colombo, how much Colombo has become cleaner in the last 10 years. In 2015, Colombo was a slum. There were posters on the walls, ruts in the roads. This was a terrible place to live in. But now, Colombo is probably the nicest city in the whole of South Asia. And that is a reward of our paying taxes, of our contributing to a system that is better. So I think we don't really need to force people into a specific way of thinking. We just need to incentivize them by showing that when they contribute, things become better. And that encourages people to do that. We need to do this, for example, with public honesty. Interesting experiment, very quickly. Drop a wallet on the road and what happens? Do people return it? Surprisingly, many people do in Sri Lanka.
Really?
Yes. So we are not bad people.
You're not bad.
We just need to tell people that we are not such bad people, and then they become better.
I'm being the devil's advocate here. We hear of so many people who are taking money, of WhatsApp messages, cyber crimes. Let's not talk about the big players who lost money, but even we're hearing a lot of stories that people are just doing unethical things. Are we a good people?
Yeah, I think we are good people. If you look at the levels of cybercrime in the US, for example, it's through the roof compared with us. Even on a per capita basis, we are much better. We're not the best.
Yeah.
We're not as honest as Singaporeans or Japanese or even Russians or Chinese. Public honesty is very high in those countries.
Right.
But we're not amongst the worst, like the UK, for example, which is much worse than us when it comes to public honesty.
Okay.
So, because they've got their own problems, let's not point us. So my point is we have to build on our strengths and not just keep griping on about our weaknesses. But our strengths are often not recognized, whether by people or by government, like in the lost opportunities we have in creating national wealth. We have dead assets that need to be awakened, and this is something that governments don't spend enough time thinking about.
It's been a lovely conversation with you, but sadly at my last question, we spoke of a lot of things. We spoke of giving credit to the government, where it's due. Then we also spoke of the need for regulation to actually come in to make sure that we create national wealth. And then we spoke a little bit about how we have what it takes. We're a good people. What is your concluding message on, because the next 6 months is probably not going to be the easiest. The landscape is full of turmoil. I'm sure there'll be opportunities too, but what is your message on how we should navigate the next 6 months?
Actually, we are still not united as a country, though the war was won, 17 years ago now. We've come out of a civil war without any of the dividend apart from peace that shouldn't have come out of that. national integration is still some distance away. We still have very discrete ethnic communities which are not truly integrated into a single national image, a single national message. And I think the grand challenge before us at the moment, both at the level of society and at the level of government, is to try and bring Sri Lankans together into a unified national identity. This is a project we should not lose sight of. It will be resisted by everybody because everybody wants to assert their own identity. But there's no way to do this other than by forcing them into one unified entity that can go forward and succeed.
Really put a definition on what it needs to be Sri Lankan.
That's the plan.
Thank you very much, Pethiyagoda. We've been in conversation with public policy advocate Rohan Pethiyagoda. Thank you very much. It was such an amazing and insightful conversation.
Very welcome. Thank you.
And thank you to all our viewers for joining us. Until next time, take care.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram and X. Thank you for watching and stay safe.